Okay. Let's unpack this first one. The latest headlines are bringing a really dramatic, almost fictional conflict to life, and with a chilling real-world codename, Red Wedding.
Hmm.
Now, for those of you who might remember Game of Thrones, you'll know this refers to, well, a truly brutal massacre, something that shatters power, completely reshapes the political landscape. It's shocking.
Yeah, the defining moment in that show.
Exactly. And incredibly, Israeli generals reportedly used this exact term for part of their operation against Iran back on June 13th, 2025. I mean, that immediately sets a certain tone, doesn't it? Coming straight from the editorial section today.
It absolutely does. It signals a very high stakes, destructive intent. Israel's objectives were pretty clear, according to the source. Targeting Iran's nuclear facilities, yes, but also its nuclear scientists, and crucially, the leadership of Iran's armed forces.
So, crippling the response capability.
Precisely. The idea was to cripple Tehran's military response capacity from the outset. They were drawing a parallel, it seems, to Israel's own 1967 airstrike on Egypt's Air Force, a move that, caused huge damage and really paved the way for a quick victory then. This Red Wedding was aimed at decapitation, basically, taking out the command structure.
Right. So looking just at the operation itself, the immediate picture. From Israel's perspective, it sounds like they achieved, well, a significant tactical success.
Operationally, yes.
They hit Natanz, they hit Isfahan, the nuclear sites. They killed, tragically, at least 10 nuclear scientists and assassinated quite a few top commanders. And doing that 2,000 kilometers away, largely by air, that's complex.
Extremely complex.
It even had wider ripple effects, maybe speeding up the fall of Assad's regime in Syria. But here's where it gets really interesting, right? What was the strategic fallout? Because a short-term win doesn't always mean a long-term victory, does it?
No, and that's exactly where the narrative flips, according to this analysis. That operational success, kind of paradoxically, seems to have led to a major strategic failure for Israel. Iran, showing remarkable speed, actually recovered.
Recovered how?
Well, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, they led a counterattack. Not just a token response, but a sustained campaign using drones and ballistic missiles. And this barrage, it really exposed some serious vulnerabilities in Israel's supposedly advanced American-backed defense systems.
So the shield wasn't impenetrable?
Apparently not. It forced Prime Minister Netanyahu within days to turn to Washington for help. That led President Trump to order U.S. airstrikes on 3 Iranian nuclear sites, including the very heavily fortified Fordo facility.
But Trump didn't want a long war.
No, not at all. He quickly declared victory, announced a ceasefire, basically leaving the Iranian government still in place, largely intact. It really highlights how these decisive tactical wins can just completely misjudge an adversary's resilience, or the long-term consequences, like a strategic boomerang.
So this strategic labyrinth our source mentions, what does that look like for Israel now long-term?
Well, it's tricky. Early U.S. intelligence assessments suggested Iran's nuclear program was only set back by, quote, a few months, not destroyed.
Only a few months.
After all that, that's what the reports indicated. And there were suggestions Iran had actually dispersed its enriched uranium before the strikes. Yeah. Foresight. Rafael Grossi, the IAEA head, assessed that Iran could resume enriching uranium pretty quickly, within months.
Okay.
And this really shows the different approaches, doesn't it? Israel seems to want regime change, but doesn't really have the resources for it. The U.S., on the other hand, wants to avoid a nuclear Iran, but also wants to avoid getting bogged down in another long war.
The difficult balance.
Very. And for Iran, this is crucial. This attack was seen as, quote, another Mossadegh moment. It reminded them of the 1953 coup.
Right, the CIA-backed coup.
Exactly. So that experience, plus the nuclear deal falling apart earlier, it just strengthens their incentive to get a nuclear weapon, much like North Korea did. They see it as the ultimate deterrent.
Which brings us back to that Game of Thrones quote the source uses.
Yeah. You didn't slaughter every one of the Starks. That was your mistake. You should have ripped them all out, root and stem.
A chilling parallel, because this 12-day war didn't destroy the regime, didn't rip out the nuclear program. It suggests this conflict, despite the ceasefire, it's far from over.
Seems that way.
Okay, moving from that high-stakes international strategy, let's bring it closer to home.
Yep.
Our next deep dive, also from the editorial section, tackles a really vital and frankly disturbing issue within India: custodial brutality and the urgent need for police reform in Tamil Nadu.
Yes, a very serious and necessary topic.
It really is heartbreaking reading these details. We start with the specific, awful case of Ajith Kumar. He was a 27-year-old temple guard in Sivaganga. His autopsy. It revealed 44 wounds, cigarette burns, even forced exposure to narcotics.
Just horrific.
And his last words to his mother, haunting: "I didn't steal." What's truly tragic, as the source points out, is that his case isn't some rare exception. It's part of a, quote, grim pattern. The article lists others. Vignesh, 25, in Chennai, died in 2022 with multiple injuries just hours after arrest. Raja, a Dalit cook in Viluppuram, died in 2024 after a petty theft claim. His family's still waiting for compensation. Then there was a 30-year-old auto rickshaw driver in Tiruchi in 2023, died under suspicious circumstances.
These are not aberrations. The analysis argues they're the outcomes of a system that has, over time, sort of normalized using force over ensuring fairness. There's a fundamental concern raised here that we're failing both the citizens, who deserve justice and protection, and actually the police force itself.
How so? Failing the police force?
By heavily investing in enforcement hardware, but critically underinvesting in the human side of policing, in reform, in welfare, in training. It creates this environment where brutality can fester.
Yeah, the source highlights that budget paradox. Thousands of crores spent on policing in Tamil Nadu, but so much goes to hardware vehicles, surveillance tech, riot gear. While the human element, officer welfare, proper training, crucial psychological support gets neglected. So what does this imbalance tell us? What needs to change?
It tells us a fundamental shift is needed, not just tinkering, but real reform. The source advocates for specific, actionable steps. First, sensible budget reallocation. Imagine if just, say, 5% of the annual budget was redirected.
Is it that fund?
It could fund district-level mental health units for officers, mandatory quarterly counseling, refresher courses on sensitivity and human rights. Because, as the piece argues, without that psychological support, the pressure, it metastasizes. Burnout becomes brutality.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
Second, police training needs a complete overhaul. Not just adding a module here or there, but a curriculum designed for modern India. Heavy focus on ethics, human rights law, trauma-informed investigation methods, real community policing, make it core.
Right, not just window dressing.
Exactly. Third, enforceable accountability. This has to go beyond just suspending a couple of constables when something terrible happens. The call is for legislative clarity, a comprehensive anti-custodial violence law. It needs time-bound investigations, mandatory video recording of interrogations, and crucially, civil society involvement and oversight, independent checks.
And technology. CCTV cameras are often mentioned.
Yes, but technology is a real safeguard. Ensure those CCTVs in custody areas are actually working, tamper-proof, and subject to real-time audits. Not just there for show. Digital systems can help, the piece says, but only if we're willing to actually look at the uncomfortable truths they might reveal.
It really boils down to this call to, as the source puts it, reimagine the police uniform, not just as a symbol of authority, but one of service, restraint, responsibility.
Power without empathy is violence by another name. That's the underlying message.
Ajit Kumar's death and the others, they're tragic reminders. The time for justice isn't post-mortem. It has to be policy, and it has to be now. It's about preventing these tragedies in the first place.
Precisely. Systemic change.
Okay, from the complexities of human systems, let's shift gears completely. We're moving to the science section now, and into something truly fundamental, the fabric of time itself. This is where it gets really mind-bending.
Ah, yes. The redefinition of the second.
Exactly. There's this huge global effort underway to redefine the second using incredibly advanced optical clocks. It sounds almost like science fiction.
It's pushing the boundaries of measurement, that's for sure. Right now, the second is defined by cesium atomic clocks. These basically count the oscillations of radiation emitted by cesium atoms.
A very specific number, right?
A very specific, very large number. 9,192,631,770 periods of that radiation equals 1 second. Think about it counting over 9 billion ticks just to define 1 second.
Wow.
And time standards have evolved, from the mean solar day to Earth's revolution, finally landing on these atomic clocks. Each step was about getting more precise.
So now we have these optical clocks. What's the big difference? Why the upgrade?
The difference is enormous. Optical clocks use lasers to probe atoms that tick at much, much higher frequencies. Optical frequencies, hence the name. Think of it like having a stopwatch with far finer markings.
So more ticks per second.
Tens of thousands of times more waves per second compared to cesium clocks. This lets them measure time with incredible precision down to something like 18 decimal places for a second.
18 decimal places. It's hard to even grasp that level of
It
accuracy.
is. Their stability is just astounding.
Okay.
One example cited uses strontium atoms. That clock would drift by less than 1 second in 15 billion years.
Longer than the age of the universe.
Pretty much. And this isn't just theoretical. This precision has real-world applications. Better GPS for all of us. In climate science, ultra-precise gravity measurements can track tiny changes in ice melt or water levels. And even in radio astronomy, remember that first picture of a black hole? That needed incredibly precise timing between telescopes across the globe. Optical clocks could make that even better.
So to get ready for this redefinition, they did a massive comparison test.
Exactly. It's described as the largest, most demanding head-to-head comparison of clocks in history. A huge undertaking. They involve 10 different optical atomic clocks.
10 clocks?
Yes, based on 5 different types of atoms: strontium, charged strontium, indium ions. And these clocks were located at 6 top labs across 3 continents: Finland, France, Germany, Italy, the UK, and Japan.
Wow. A truly global effort. How on earth do you link clocks that far apart with the kind of precision needed for this? That seems like a huge technical hurdle.
It's a marvel of engineering. They use different methods depending on the distance. For clocks close by, like in the same lab, they used short, dedicated optical fibers.
Okay.
Across countries like France, Germany, and Italy, they actually used existing telecom fibers. But they had to install special repeaters and amplifiers to keep the time signal incredibly clean.
Clever. And for intercontinental links, like to Japan.
For those really long distances across the English Channel, the Baltic Sea, to Japan, they used an advanced GPS technique. It's called Integer Precise Point Positioning, or IPPP. Think super GPS, accurate down to centimeters, allowing hyper-accurate time transfer.
Incredible.
They even had backup clocks ready for maintenance periods. These clocks all ran together for 45 days straight back in early 2022, generated a huge amount of data. 38 independent frequency comparisons, including 4 that had never been directly measured before.
So after all that, what did they learn? Did everything line up perfectly, or were there, hiccups? What stood out?
Well, that's the value of such a huge test. While most results agreed incredibly well, it did reveal some subtle issues. Gaps they will have to fix before 2030, as the source puts it.
Like what?
For instance, the Italian Iterbium clock showed a tiny discrepancy about 4 parts in 10 to the 16 when measured via GPS versus fiber. Tiny, but real. It pointed to a subtle issue in how the signal was distributed. Similarly, the strontium clocks in France and Germany had very small but measurable offsets compared to other clocks. Again, fractions of a quadrillionth of a second, but important at this level. Identifying these things now is exactly why they do these large redundant campaigns. It lets them pinpoint and fix errors.
So they needed a sophisticated way to combine all this data.
Absolutely. They developed a complex statistical approach, basically creating a huge matrix, 38 by 38, mapping out all the correlations between the measurements to combine the results responsibly without errors propagating.
So by showing these 10 different clocks could mostly agree down to 1016 or even 1018 and finding where they didn't, this test has really paved the way.
It's cleared major obstacles for redefining the SI second using these optical clocks. A huge step for fundamental science with implications for technology we use every day.
Okay, from the ultra-precise world of timekeeping, let's dive into something designed to help us manage the sheer unpredictability of nature catastrophe bonds. This is from the tech section today.
Cat bonds. An interesting financial innovation.
Yeah, especially relevant maybe for India, where the source notes there's quite low penetration of disaster risk insurance for individuals. Globally, these cat bonds really took off after major hurricanes in the U.S. back in the late 90s hit even the reinsurers hard.
Right. Reinsurers, the insurance companies, even they were facing massive losses, which signaled a need for a new way to handle these huge concentrated risks.
So what exactly is a catastrophe bond? How does it work?
Well, what's fascinating here is that they're described as a unique hybrid insurance-cum-debt financial product. Essentially, their purpose is to take insurance cover for natural disasters and transform it into a tradable security.
Okay, insurance into a security. How?
Through securitization. You bundle the risk associated with specific disasters, say earthquakes above a certain magnitude in a particular region, and sell bonds backed by that risk to investors. This transfers the hazard risk away from just the affected state or traditional insurers.
It friends it out.
Exactly. Spreads it to the much larger, deep-pocketed global financial markets. This achieves a few key things. It unlocks a much larger pool of funds for post-disaster relief and reconstruction, potentially ensures quicker payouts, and reduces the risk of an insurer defaulting. It's really about shifting risk using financial markets.
So who are the main players involved in making one of these bonds happen?
Typically, you have a sponsor, often a sovereign nation or a group of nations, that needs the insurance cover. They pay the premium. The principal amount of the bond is the total sum insured.
Okay.
Then you usually have an intermediary. It could be the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, maybe a large reinsurance company. They issue the bond to investors. Their involvement adds credibility and reduces counterparty risk.
And the investors, what's their side of the deal? What's the risk and reward?
The risk for the investor is losing some, or potentially all, of their principal investment if the specified disaster actually occurs and triggers the bond's payout conditions.
Okay, so that's why they get paid more.
Precisely. To compensate for that risk, these bonds offer higher coupon rates, higher interest payments than typical government or corporate bonds. And the rate varies depending on the perceived risk. An earthquake bond in a less active zone might offer a lower premium, maybe 1–2%, while a hurricane bond in an active region would command a much higher rate.
So beyond the higher yield, what's the appeal for these big investors? Pension funds, hedge funds?
Profitability is definitely key, but a huge part of the appeal is diversification. The source quotes Nobel laureate Harry Markowitz, quote, "Risk diversification is truly the only free lunch in finance."
And how do cat bonds fit that?
Because climate or geological hazards, hurricanes, earthquakes are historically unrelated to the movements of traditional financial markets, like stocks and bonds. Adding cat bonds to a portfolio helps smooth out returns because they likely won't crash at the same time as the rest of the market. It effectively de-risks the overall portfolio.
Makes sense.
That's why pension funds are big investors.
Mm.
Hedge funds, family offices too. And it's not a tiny niche market anymore. The source mentions $180 billion in new issuances globally since inception, with around $50 billion currently outstanding. It's substantial.
Okay, let's unpack this for India specifically. Does India really need these? The source argues yes.
Yes, the argument is compelling. Climate change is making disaster risk increasingly difficult and expensive for traditional insurers to cover profitably. Premiums rise, demand falls, and the financial burden lands back on individuals and the government.
So the government could step in.
Exactly. Governments like India's can sponsor cat bonds. Given India's increasing vulnerability to extreme weather, its financial stability, and its proactive steps in risk reduction, like allocating significant funds for mitigation sponsoring cat bonds via an intermediary like the World Bank, could be a very cost-effective way to secure large-scale disaster funding upfront.
Shifting the risk proactively, what about working with neighbors? The source mentions a regional possibility.
That's a really exciting prospect discussed in the text. India could potentially lead a South Asian cat bond. Think about the shared risks across the region. Earthquakes hitting Nepal, Bhutan, India, cyclones or tsunamis affecting India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Myanmar.
Right, the risks cross borders.
Exactly. A regional bond would spread that risk even further, likely reducing the premium costs for everyone involved and making the whole region financially much stronger and more resilient together. It's a powerful idea for regional cooperation.
It sounds very promising. Are there any potential downsides or challenges we should be aware of, things that could go wrong?
Definitely. A key risk is a poorly designed bond. The trigger mechanism has to be absolutely right. Imagine an earthquake bond set to trigger a magnitude 6.6, but a devastating 6.5 quake hits no payout despite massive damage. That's a disaster.
The details really matter.
Immensely. Another challenge is transparency. Governments need clear procedures to compare the premium paid for the bond against the historical average annual cost of disaster recovery. This ensures it's actually cost-effective for the taxpayer, especially in years when no disaster occurs and the bond doesn't pay out. You need to justify the ongoing expense.
All right, for our final deep dive today, let's turn to a really positive story of significant educational achievement right here in India. Also from the text section, Himachal Pradesh has made this surprising, quite remarkable leap into the top 5 states in the National Achievement Survey, the NAS 2025 results. They jumped all the way from 21st place in 2021.
That is a dramatic improvement, yes. Quite noteworthy.
First, maybe just briefly, what exactly is the NAS? What does it measure?
Sure. The NAS is a large-scale nationwide assessment. It's conducted every 3 years by the Ministry of Education. Its main goal is to measure the learning outcomes of students in government and government-aided schools.
Which grades and subjects?
It focuses on classes 3, 5, 8, and 10. and covers core subjects, language, maths, and science, sometimes social science too, depending on the grade. It's seen as a valuable diagnostic tool for states, giving them data on how their school systems are performing.
But it has limitations.
It does. As the source notes, it's useful, but it primarily measures what's easily testable through multiple choice questions. It doesn't necessarily capture broader educational goals like, say, critical thinking, emotional development, creativity, or civic awareness. Those are harder to measure on a standardized test like this.
Okay, so Himachal's jump from 21st to the top 5. That's huge. It signals, as the source puts it, a reversal of decline. Can you give us a bit of that historical context? What was the decline?
Right. Himachal's public education system was actually once seen as a model, especially for other Hill states, after independence. But in the post-liberalization era, things started to struggle. Issues like relying heavily on contractual teacher hiring, not enough regular recruitment, maybe some compromises on academic standards. It led to an erosion of quality in public schools. And the result? A noticeable exodus of students, even in villages, towards private schools. So this turnaround is significant against that backdrop.
So what changed? What was the shift under the current government led by Sukhvinder Singh Sukhu that sparked this improvement? Was it just one thing, or?
It seems to be a mix, according to the analysis. A combination of rational restructuring, partly driven by demographic changes, and importantly, a renewed, visible commitment to public education itself.
Demographic changes.
Yeah, like declining fertility rates shown in the National Family Health Survey, NFHS 5. Fewer children meant some schools had very low enrollment. Instead of just letting things drift, the administration used this data proactively to consolidate resources, to adapt. They seem to have focused on investing in human capital, the teachers, and quality, not just building more schools.
Right, a strategic response. So what were some of the specific reforms they actually implemented on the ground?
The source highlights several key initiatives. First, they merged over 1,000 under-enrolled schools. Now that sounds like closure, but the goal was rationalization, better deployment of teachers, better infrastructure utilization, avoiding tiny, isolated schools.
Okay, consolidation for quality.
Exactly. Second, they unified the school education system under one single directorate, covering everything from pre-primary right up to class 12. This aimed for better focus, coherence, and accountability across the whole system.
Makes sense.
Third, they encouraged more decision-making at the school level. This can really boost teachers' and students' sense of ownership. They also provided exposure visits, national and international, for teachers and top students to learn from innovative practices elsewhere.
Spreading good ideas.
Yes. And finally, they adopted a cluster-based model for school management. This encourages schools within a cluster to collaborate, share resources, learn from each other, and involve the local community more directly.
That sounds like a really comprehensive effort trying to rebuild faith in the public system. But back to the NAS results. Does that jump in rank truly capture the full impact of all these changes? What's the bigger picture here?
That's the critical question the source raises. While the NAS result is definitely an important signal, it shows Himachal's back on track in terms of basic learning outcomes. It probably doesn't reflect the whole story.
Like the socio-emotional aspect?
Exactly. Things like student well-being, the quality of the relationships between teachers and students, how engaged the community feels, these aren't really measured by the NAS. The danger, the source warns, is mistaking performance in standardized tests for education itself.
Right. Teaching to the test versus holistic education.
Precisely. Some of Sound's real achievement might be broader. It's about rekindling faith in the idea of public education. Looking ahead, the challenges remain. Making sure teacher appointments are regularized, expanding assessments to capture those holistic aspects, and critically, ensuring that rural and marginalized students aren't left behind as the system improves.
It's a reminder that progress is multifaceted. Their success is encouraging, showing public systems can deliver. So, reflecting on that, what stands out to you? How might we, in our own communities, strike that balance between needing standardized metrics and pursuing those broader, maybe more nuanced goals of education? Something to think about. Thank you for listening. If today's episode gave you something useful, consider following us on Spotify so you're the first to hear the next one. You can give suggestions by contacting on Twitter handle given in the episode description. We are always eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.